talk about rebuilding a Browning 22 Auto. I have laying here on my clean napkin one of my kits. Consists of the striker spring, the recoil spring, a cartridge guide. Here's a cartridge stop, which is also a retainer. Here's a trigger return spring, or sear spring. I take it back. Here is a sear spring sticking to my magnetic. And in my kit, I will have 2 each of these plungers because they're easy to lose, and there's 2 different sizes. The old guns only have 1. The newer models have two springs and 2 plungers. So I'm going to run through real quick on how to install this kit. And I have chosen out of my inventory a 22 Auto that it's an old model I've taken the stock off, but the stock is held on by the screw up through the wrist, and they're basically the same gun. But the newer models have a longer tube and they have a nut that goes on the end. But we'll talk about that at a later date. So today we're just going to talk about installing this kit. So to remove your trigger plate, you pull your bolt back and slide it forward. Now, in the receiver are several parts we're going to replace, and they're easy to do. You have this spring is a cartridge stop, and this spring also holds in place your cartridge guide. This little cartridge stop spring protrudes through the cartridge guide, and it catches the next round coming through and holds it in place until the bolt comes and drives it forward. So we're going to have that in our kit because they can wear. Now, to remove the cartridge guide, the spring just pops out like so, and slide it forward. Out comes your spring and your cartridge guide. Now, your cartridge guide is got T slots, and you just slide it in like so, and then your little cartridge stop spring here sticks in the hole. I'm in this hole right here in the side of the cartridge guide, and you put that in the hole. It'll protrude through, and then you lay the spring in. Sometimes I'm all fingers here. A little set of tweezers is pretty handy for installing all these items. Right there it is. All right, so the spring is just laying in place. You take a little screwdriver and just push it over into the side of the frame, and the tail of it pushes over and snaps in like so. That holds in your cartridge guide, and just a little tip of that is sticking out, which that's important. That catches the next round coming in. So that's really all you have to do for your receiver. The trigger plate, take the safety off and drop your striker, and then to remove your springs, just pop them out, pry up on the recoil spring, and just push forward on the striker spring, and it's out. There's your firing pin. That's not really a firing pin, that's a striker. One thing I forgot to talk about, and I don't have it, I'm not showing it here today, but it will be in the kit, is a extractor spring. You need to replace that, and you need to pull this extractor out because they get really cruddy behind it. So you drive out this little pin, and you have this little housing that retains the spring, and out comes your retainer and your extractor spring. You slide the extractor out. This one I've already cleaned up, but when you slide your extractor out, you're going to find it's going to be really caked up with a lot of crud. But to put it back in, that's the important part. You just slide your extractor back into the T-slots. You put your extractor spring into the little hole in the housing, and you slide it up into position. And these two are in a T-slot. Push it in, and then put your retaining pin back in. And then you have installed a new spring, and you'll clean all that crud out of your bolt. Well, you got out, I'd scrub it up and clean it up good too. Okay, so I'm going to put the extractor back in position here, the striker. Now in your kit also is going to be a sear spring. It's a little small spring that makes this, that puts the tension on this sear. You see this sear works up and down. Now to take that out, and these, you've got two pins here. One that holds your sear spring in place and one that holds the sear in place. Those are usually staked into position, and you kind of need to restake them when you take them out and put them in, because if they work out, they'll catch the bolt and cause jams. So just drive the top one out, like so, and that will remove your sear spring. Now, in your kit, these two springs are included in the kit. I will say you don't really have to replace them if you don't want to. These parts don't really go bad very often, but they're in the kit if you want to, and if you do, this is how you do it. So there's your little sear spring. Now drive out the next pin. That's your sear. And I've been into this gun before, so I've already staked the pins, and also they're a little tight. Anyway, I've driven out the pin, and then out comes your sear. When you reinstall that sear, make sure the hook is up. Okay, so we've removed that. Now there again, I don't know that you can take these parts out and replace them if you want. Replace the springs. It's not always necessary, but you can do it. So drive your trigger pin out, and then push the trigger up and rotate it out forward. And here's your trigger return spring. Now your new spring, you just take and slide it right on top of there. This is a little tricky, but you slide this back in, rotate it in, and your trigger return spring's got to be kind of in position. You rotate it around. You simply line up the hole and put your trigger retaining pin back in. So, and then test it, see if, yep, it rebounds, so everything's working there. All right. Now this is also this serves two purposes. This is rebound for your trigger, and it's also your disconnector spring. And this is your disconnector here. And we'll talk about that when I get back together. Okay. So now put your sear back in with the hook up and drive in the pin. I won't worry about staking these today because this is just for demonstration purposes. Just kind of eyeball it and line it up and replace your spring, your pin. Tap it in flush, and there's your sear with the hook up. Now I'll show you how to test this to make sure everything's right. Your sear spring goes in next. And you get the pin out of the way. All right, so you drop in your sear spring, right like so. And this will be a little tricky to put in too. You now have to push down that spring. I use a little punch or a jeweler's screwdriver or something, and push that sear spring down out of the way so you can drive your pin in. You don't want to drive in that retaining pin and hit that spring. So I've driven in my pin. Now I have caught that sear spring in there. Now if I go ahead and drive this pin on through, it'll catch the spring and knock a coil off of it. So come in from the other side and kind of push down on the other side of the spring and get it out of the way, and then drive your pin in. So now, and then check to make sure you have spring tension on. I'm trying to keep my hands out of the way. Spring tension on the sear. This is your disconnector. There's tension on that. Now to test all that, replace your springs. Slide on. You have a guide here. Slide on your new striker spring onto that guide, and put it down into the striker like so. Then lay your bolt in to position back in the trigger plate, and then push your striker spring in, and there's a little indentation right above the sear, and that sits in there. Now, while I've got this gun apart, I'll talk a little bit about this. This is a long rifle. This is a short bolt. The springs are all the same for a long rifle and short, but there's a difference in the shorts. If you see, they've lightened this bolt up so it'll function with the shorts. They've made some cuts in the bolt to remove excess weight, and so this bolt is lighter, and that'll work with the shorts. This is a heavier bolt, which is a long rifle, so there are differences between the bolts. And there is a difference too in shorts. When you order a kit, you need to specify, because this cartridge guide is different for a short. The other parts are pretty much interchangeable. So now slide your recoil spring in to the bolt, and yeah, I got one all set up here. Here's one, and the guide is on the recoil spring. Stick your guide back into it and put it in the bolt like so. Then you kind of hold things in position here and push forward, push it all into the bolt. You'll need a little punch or something to kind of catch this guide and rotate it around, and it snaps into this little spur that sticks out on the side of the frame. Now you want to test it and make sure everything's together right. And the way you do that, you push the bolt back and see if your striker works, and it does. Now you want to test your disconnector. Hold your trigger, push that bolt back, and see if it catches. It does. And so you have to release the trigger to make it fire. So that's how you test your disconnector. Push it back. I'm holding, as hard as I'm holding the trigger, I'm sliding the bolt back to make sure it disconnects. And so it won't fire until I release that trigger. And bang, it fires. In my kit, I'm not sending you a detent spring for the safety, because in this kit, when you get it, if you need it, you're going to have an extra plunger and spring that goes in your barrel lock that we're getting ready to get to next. And that also is the same spring and plunger that goes in your safety, that puts the detent on your safety. So our trigger plate is rebuilt. We've got our cartridge guide and cartridge stop spring in. So you can put this all back together by sliding the bolt back and sliding this all into the receiver, like so. And then you test it again. Hold your trigger back and bring your bolt back. You should have to release it. See that it's disconnecting. Hold it back, release, go. Put your safety on and make sure that works. So your receiver is done. Now the barrel. And these guns, they're always losing springs and plungers that go in your takedown assembly here. And we're going to talk about that. This is an older model gun that has a newer stuff. The old models generally have one spring and plunger. I'm going to push this out. This is your takedown latch here. Now hold on to things when you do that, because there's a spring and plunger here behind it. Here's your spring and plunger. That's one of them. This has a newer style retainer in it. So this has a spring and plunger in the rear of this takedown latch. So when you put these guns together, you can adjust them simply by putting them in the receiver, and then you look down inside the receiver and make sure this barrel is coming up against your cartridge stop. That's important. The barrel needs to be up pretty close to the front of this cartridge stop. You won't be able to see it looking down in the receiver here, but that's how you know your barrel's in adjustment. If you have a gap between the end of your barrel and this cartridge stop, you're a turn out or so. So you look down in, you can take your it's easy to adjust these this adjustment, this little knurled adjustment ring, and you have this collar behind it. It's easy to adjust when it's out of the gun and before you put all your springs and all back in. And you want this to tighten up with just a little tension on the barrel. So we move that collar around, and I got that about where I want it, where I got to kind of bring it up hard and to get it locked up in a position. That's the way I want it. That way I know that barrel will be in adjustment, it won't be loose. And then carefully take things out. Now, this is a tricky part, but it can be done. Put your your spring and detent in your takedown latch. Put your spring and detent here into the takedown collar, as in such. And I hold it sideways so the spring doesn't fall out of my latch. And I'll slide this into the T-slots. I put this barrel in sideways. And I've got the collar adjusted where I want it. Now I'm going to slide everything in. I have my spring and plunger here. I have my spring and plunger in my little takedown latch. Slide that in to the T-slots. Like so. Lift up this spring and plunger here, get it out of the way, bring it forward. Then I come forward, I push down on this one carefully, and I try to slide my takedown latch up over that. It's trying to jump out on me again. That's the reason I give you extras, because you might lose one. Push it down, bring this forward, and trap it. And then lift up on this little one here, get it out of the way, and then bring everything forward if it'll come. It takes patience, but it can be done. Push that out of your way. Lift this one up, and then bang, it all comes forward. Now, that little flat detent, there's a little flat on this rear detent. It needs to be locked into these serrations, so it's the wrong position now. So I take this little screwdriver, I push it around to where it snaps in and locks into there. Now, I'm going to test it to see if everything is in the way I want it. Put it in, rotate it around, push it back just enough to get it out of the way of the receiver. Don't push back too far, you'll lose your spring. So, and rotate this around. We put it right side up now. Bring it around and see if you're out of adjustment. Well, see, in all that tinkering around inside there, my adjustment ring here got moved, and see, now I can't lock it up. So you need to turn this adjustment ring. Hear that? Those detents? And see, it's getting a little closer. Give it another notch, another click, and that's about perfect right there. Comes right up against there, and this slides forward and locks it. And you've successfully put in your takedown latch. And so anyway, that's kind of a brief rundown on how to rebuild your 22 auto, and some of the tricks for putting this kit in. And as I say, there will be an extra spring set of springs and plungers in that kit, because you're likely to lose one, as you saw how they jumped out on me. And if you do, well, you've got an extra set. And there again, if you want to replace your detent in your safety, this adjustment spring and plunger is the same for the safety. That's a part that's up in here. It'll work in the safety too. Well, that's basically on how you install a rebuild kit or take down and clean your Browning 22 auto takedown.